Welcome back, everyone. MaryAnne, Kai, thank you for being back here. We've got a slew of questions, so I will just go ahead and rattle these off. Kai, I think most of these might be specific to you, so let me just open with this one. What do you consider the biggest contributor to misinformation?
I mean, I guess, man, that's a tough question. Writ large, I guess my answer would be the internet. But I mean, the answer is so much more complex than that. It just makes it so much easier to get information to people and therefore to get disinformation to people.
Mm.
The internet or social media sites or journalists haven't done a very good job of figuring out how to let people know what is real or who is real and what isn't. We're still trying to figure that out. We're doing a lousy job of combating it. Um, I think those bad actors have been out there forever, right? It's not
Right.
like propaganda is new or misinformation or disinformation is new. It's just that means of getting it to people, particularly through social media.
That actually might set us up perfectly for this next question here from one of our viewers. What impact do you see TikTok having on journalism? I think
I,
perhaps it seems to be the most popular platform right now.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't a great answer, but I think it remains to be seen. Um, I think a lot of with every social media platform that was the biggest at the time, everyone was like, "This is going to change journalism," right? Facebook was going to change journalism. Facebook convinced news outlets to post their content for free on Facebook, which shocker was a terrible idea because no one made any money on their own news. Facebook made the money. So Facebook's no longer the answer. Then, Snap for a while was like the hot place for media. Obviously, that's not the case anymore. I know there's some differences with TikTok, the amount of users, and then also the algorithm just appears to be so much better than others. But I don't know. I just hate to predict that just because journalism is littered with people predicting that X social media site will be the future, and then
Yes.
it is not.
Got it. Appreciate that. Um, MaryAnne, give this one to you here. Let me see if I get this one right. How much consideration should we give our emotions when discerning a calling?
Well, that's a very interesting
Yeah.
piece because one of the things that Ignatius really talks about is the fact that we have to use our whole person in order to respond to a call. So both our intuition, our emotions, and our intellect, all of those play into responding to something that we feel called to. And we have to be discerning about it. If we went with only logic, then we would not be paying attention to what draws us, invites us, because so much of that is felt within our own bodies. So I think it's always a matter of proportionality. And I think it's also a matter of balance, realizing that all of these are parts of who we are. And we need to pay attention to each of those parts. So I would say we have to be intentional around our emotions and our intellect in that process.
Along those lines, there's a question here that goes along those lines, sister, and I actually want to give this one to you, Kip. Or maybe both of you might have a comment on this. And forgive me, I'm going to try and paraphrase this because this was a fairly long one. It's from a student, speaking of passion or calling. This individual feels called to journalism and is currently studying journalism. Their question is looking ahead, and this is obviously maybe in response to the film, but looking ahead and seeing, one, the low pay and now threats against my well-being, should I consider another career? Any advice, friends, to this student who's rethinking their calling?
I'll just talk nuts and bolts of journalism, and then I would say no. If I think if you have a calling and feel called to it as a young person, you at least have to try it. Otherwise, you might wonder for the rest of your life, should I have followed that passion of mine? Being poor in 23 isn't so bad. I had fun doing it in New York. Um, Making that decision, going down that path, I think it's understandable that college students feel like many decisions are forever decisions, but they're really not. And you can certainly change careers if it turns out that journalism isn't for you, or the money just isn't there for you, or whatever it is in terms of danger. That's very real. However, the fact is that, at least in the United States, I don't want to speak for everywhere, the vast majority of journalism jobs are not going to put you in danger like that, right? It's a very specific group of people who are doing the specific reporting generally that puts them in danger.
Along those lines, sister, I want to ask you this. This is my question to this question here, I guess. Are we conflating calling and career incorrectly?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think we use our skills within a calling, but we may not be using the skills in the terms of a career. For instance, I've been called to religious life. I was attracted to a congregation who is immersed in education and healthcare and all the variations that were starting to happen after Vatican II. So I certainly got educated in a liberal arts education with a certain set of skills moving forward, but my eye was on service, which I expressed through teaching in various ways. So while education became part of what I did as a religious administration did, the way I thought I was going to be teaching or what I was going to be doing shifted many different times. So while I use the skill, it's not a specific job, or I would say a very straight line in terms of career. Calling is really about a draw to a charism, a way of being in the world that allows you to give of yourself to really Christ in a way that is for all people. You take your talents and who you are with them. And for me, I was really attracted by my own community and its charism because it was so open-ended and it seemed so creative. So for me, I didn't enter because they taught. I wasn't looking at a career path that I thought would be very solid and so forth. It was really the calling that drew me in, and then my own particular skills, of course, went with me. And then I found them being used in all kinds of different ways, related, but not necessarily following a straight path.
Oh, very good. Thank you, sister.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's an interesting one. I think coming off the midterms, I'm not surprised we got a question like this. Kip, I'll give this one to you. Are the complaints against the mainstream media legitimate, or is this just another boogeyman of the alt-right?
When you say Kip, do you mean me?
Oh, Kip, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at the person that sent the message. Kai, I'm so sorry. Our questioner Kip sent Kai a question. Sorry about that.
Can you repeat it?
Sure. Are the complaints against the individual, Kip uses quotes, mainstream media legitimate, or is this just another boogeyman of the alt-right?
That's a great question. And what I would say is there are legitimate complaints to make about news media, but I would say the vast majority, at least, of the ones made by the right or the far right are very disingenuous and often not true. I notice I have students in class who, we talk about news all the time, and they very much tend to subscribe to Fox is on the right and CNN is on the left, right? And it's like a false equivalence, really, saying that Fox is the right one and CNN is the left one. Well, one, you can't really compare them because CNN has many faults, but it does not tend to espouse things that aren't true, and it is news. And also, it's not very far to the left. It really isn't. It's pretty in our center, or today's center, maybe center left, right?
Mhm.
But the right is, or the far right or whatever, is so good at making people think that CNN is the Fox of the left or whatever you want to say, and that therefore the news on CNN you can't trust, which generally is not true. You can trust it. Just as people on the far right will look at, say, the New York Times makes a correction on a story. They got something wrong and they put in the story, we got this wrong, and then we corrected it. They'll point to that as proof that the New York Times lies or doesn't know how to do its job or whatever. But what it is proof of is that the New York Times is honest, and the New York Times does what journalists do, and that is continue to try to get as close to the truth as possible. And so if they write something that they believe is the truth, and then, I mean, people make mistakes too, or they learn something new, they'll update it like that. Corrections to me are proof of that the system is working correctly, not that it's working incorrectly. So, yeah, despots, autocrats, people who want to take over, the first thing they do is eliminate a free press. And I think that these disingenuous attacks from the right are along those lines, trying to eliminate people's belief in a free press, which makes it a lot easier to control people.
We have time for one more question, and I think, Kai, I'm going to go with this one, if I may, along a similar line, just because this is actually I found this all very interesting. Thank you. I think this is along the same lines, but more personal, shall we say, to this individual. I'm going to try and read this best I can. Again, it's another one that I'm going to paraphrase. I'm about to go home for Thanksgiving. What advice do you have for someone who loves their family, but finds it hard to talk with them when they only get their news from Facebook and social media? Any advice?
I feel like if I could solve that problem, I'd be rich and famous.
Yeah.
I've had students, especially in our introduction to journalism class, when we come back from Thanksgiving break, I'm always eager. There's always at least one student who talks about how they were able to participate in these discussions of politics or world events at the Thanksgiving dinner table in a way they never had been before because of what they were learning in class and how good that felt and how impressed their family was. I think you don't want to tisk people. You don't want to humiliate them. You don't want to tell them they're foolish for reading what they believe, et cetera, et cetera. I think the best you can do is just try to calmly tell them what you believe, and best case scenario, by dessert, everyone will be friends, right? I don't know if you're changing any minds at Thanksgiving dinner, but I do think it's important to at least say what you believe, right? Maybe be positive. Actually, I believe this, rather than you're wrong, what you believe is wrong, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But Sister MaryAnne probably has a better answer than I do.
Well, I don't know if I have a better answer, but I've done so much with facilitation over the years that one of the things I learned that can be very helpful, especially when people think you're going to come down on them, is to say, well, I have another perspective that I'd like to share with you. And this is a learning I've had. So here it is, and being a little tentative that none of us has the whole picture, and even saying language like that. Well, here's another piece or another side I've learned in working with certain people or being exposed to information from another point of view. And I think sometimes that surprises people, especially when they're ready for the fight. And you say, well, here's just another perspective. And then I learned something about the word however rather than but. Instead of saying, I hear what you're saying, but I think you really need to consider this. Just saying, I hear what you're saying here. However, from my point of view, this is what is very helpful. And the whole point of this one teaching was to really get rid of that, because you're always using leverage and putting somebody else's opinion in a lesser position than your own. So these are kind of mechanical, not philosophical methodologies, but they have helped me over the years.
Good practical advice. Kai, MaryAnne, thank you both very much. Thank you to all those that joined us. A happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And we'll see you all again in the new year when we reconvene the series in February. So take care, everyone.